Hey, folks, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Um, Super excited to participate in teaching you in this training session, not here today, but in June, on how to rapidly build the visions that you have and get them to the right state to be able to show to your friends and family and potential investors and alpha testers and beta testers, and even get them to MVP launch. So it's amazing times that we live in today, that we can have an idea as an individual, whether we're technical or not, and be able to, with a little bit of effort and a little bit of knowledge, bring it to fruition and get it out in the public sphere. That's amazing. That's never existed before. We'll talk about it a bit after I introduce myself and have Chris introduce himself. This will be, uh, we'll sort of talk about the new dynamics of the world that we're all living in. I'm super excited to nerd out with you on this. And thank you, Chris, for joining me in this nerd out session that we're going to do. A bit about me and why I guess I'm, one, teaching, and two, while I'm excited about this kind of stuff. I discovered, code when I was 14 years old in 1984. And instead of having like a normal high school life, I spent my life in the computer lab uh, and studied electrical engineering, never done a day of it, have always done software since 1984. I'm currently running a venture-backed AI platform called Mind Studio. Um, and whatever, it's in market. This isn't about that, and neither is our training in June about that at all. It's about a broader thing that we're part of the ecosystem. Prior to that, I spent 4 years at Google. On the product side, I ran a number of machine learning teams there. Prior to that, I was the chief technology officer of MySpace Music, if any of you are old enough to remember the days of MySpace. Before that, I built two other venture-backed companies. One was a major competitor to YouTube called VEOH, V-E-O-H, raised $70 million there in venture capital. By the way, here we've raised so far $36 million. And then prior to my competitor, I love MySpace, yes. Prior to VEOH, I built another venture-backed company called Aconix Systems. It was an enterprise software cybersecurity company, perimeter security. Raised $34 million for that. So I've now raised over $140 million for three companies that I founded and have run over a 19-year period of time. So things have changed, and I'm going to offer you some perspective on what's changed. A lot has changed. And whatever, prior to that, I ran web at Fujitsu for 5 years, this giant Japanese. I'm just an old nerd. That's all it is. I'm an old nerd. Um, and anyway, so that's me, and I will be one of the instructors in June, teaching you how to do all of this. By the way, if any of you want to get a taste of it, on Friday, this coming Friday at noon, I'm hosting a 1 to 2 hour masterclass where we're going to dive into it. And I'm going to tease you with what we can do in 1 to 2 hours, and then we can talk about what we can do, like if you join the Institute. So, but that's secondary. I'm super excited. This morning, out of the blue, I decided I was going to ping Chris on Facebook and say, hey, if you're not doing anything, maybe you can come and riff with me here. Somehow he said yes. I can't tell you how thrilled I am that he said yes. And so, Chris, I'm not going to bastardize my way of trying to introduce you. So I'm going to have you do it. But Chris is kind of a big deal.
No worries. Thank you for having me, Dimitri. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks to all of you for hosting me. This is going to be fun. Well, who the hell I am? So I've been building startups and products and go-to-market strategies and ecosystems and APIs for the better part of 30 years. I think just under 30 years, 28 years. Um, I've been doing that in all sorts of industries and helping companies at all sorts of stages. I helped build this thing called the Data Portability Project, which advocated for open standards and became part of the GDPR law. Helped to build media platforms for all the major media companies, all the three-letter names you've ever heard of, CNN and ABC and whatever. We built that up to 85 billion API calls a month, powering all their homepages and all their apps. And then more recently, I helped build and run some of the earlier Uber product team and earlier Uber product, in particular the developer platform there, in the early-ish days there. And now I'm sort of semi-retired. I advise a small handful of companies how to avoid dead ends, wasted time, indecision, hedging. Just fast forward to the best venture scale Silicon Valley style outcomes as quickly as possible. And I run a podcast twice a week actually about startups, master classes about startups, and also reacting to the news of the week in the startup and tech scene. And Dimitri, you mentioned you got into computers from your computer lab. Lucky you had a computer lab. I had a little old computer in the back of the library when I was 10 or 12, and I would sit there programming in BASIC, and they had no save button. So I'd have to every lunchtime I'd have to go back and rewrite what I wrote last time and try to make more progress from there. So that's how I got into computers.
Hmm. I'm older than you. I was around when there was no save. We had no
There you
hard
go.
drives. We had floppy drives, and so I had my 5 1/4 floppy container, and we'd go in. We'd have to boot up the system every time we started it. By the way, I said computer lab. There were two Apple II E's that were in a closet,
Yes, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
There's
But they
more
didn't
gray
have they
hairs
didn't
than I
have
think
computer
we would
books.
like.
Yeah, this was in the 80s. If you went to, a bookstore, there was no programming section. There were no computer books in bookstores. And so there was just
Hmm.
one book that I was able to check out of the library that I never returned. Had 186 pages, and that was it. It was on basic. And that's what we did.
Nice,
Anyway, dinosaur.
nice.
Um, okay, well, so with that in mind, again, thanks so much for joining. Hopefully, everybody understands why I am thrilled to speak with Chris, because he's got this multidimensionality, and I want to point you guys to that. I think what we're going to talk about here is actually ultimately important for you guys to understand, and I haven't had the ability to kind of have this conversation in public broadly, and so it's the first time we're doing it. It's like hopefully you understand how valuable this is about to be. Let me maybe take 2 minutes and like frame it, Chris, and then like we
Mhm.
jump in any time. So as I mentioned, like I raised my first round of venture capital in April of 20, 2001, April of 2001. A year, 11 months after starting a company, Aconic Systems, again, which was the cybersecurity company that ended up raising $34 million in 4 rounds, had over 2 million deployed enterprise seats in companies doing, cybersecurity stuff. I had never raised venture capital before, and I had $3.25 million worth of business that we had booked and recognized, and it took me like 9 months to get the lead investor over the finish line to like write the check. We raised $5 million in April of 2005. At that time, there were, if I looked around, there were very few people like me that could go and like build a product, bring it to market, get it deployed, get revenue, fulfill obligations, book that revenue, and raise money. And so VCs had very limited deal flow because the bottleneck were entrepreneurs capable enough of launching sort of tech companies. And then every year since then, there have been sort of more and more of those types of entrepreneurs and teams of people that could like partner as a founding team and then have an idea and build a product and get it to a point where it could be pitched to a venture capitalist or get it in market and again get traction and then sort of raise venture capital. And so the bottleneck has always been sort of the ability to like package up solutions to offer to either the market or investors to be able to do. But now we're entering this like, I'll call it the ludicrous phase of the evolution of that, where again, one of the bottlenecks has always been probably the biggest. There are always lots of business ideas, people who had an idea for a company or a product, but they weren't sort of able to find a technical co-founder that could help them bring that idea and that VCs would believe in investing in. That's always been the biggest bottleneck, sort of like limitation on technical co-founders, and then the ability of the early technical team to be able to get something to market. Like that's where everybody got stuck. But now, because of AI, multiple dimensions of those bottlenecks are sort of being dissolved. And on one hand, that's extraordinarily exciting because like, you can have an idea, and later this weekend, you can build a prototype or build an MVP, launch it, post it on Twitter or wherever else you want to go, and say, "Look at this thing I just vibe coded this weekend." And that's amazing. That's only going to get faster and faster and faster to be able to do. Today, you still need to know how to vibe code, and that's what I'm going to teach you. Um, but that's going to get easier and easier. And so over time, people, the next generation, a few cohorts down, are going to need, in a sense, less training to do this kind of stuff because the tools are just going to get easier and easier to do. And therefore, more and more people with ideas can bring their ideas to life. Now that's both amazing. It's also creates countless dimensions of weirdness for like, what does it mean to go raise money when anybody can just build the same thing you just built in a weekend? If 50,000 people can build it next weekend, like what's the moat, which is what all VCs are looking at? What's about to disrupt you that before VCs have a chance to do due diligence, there have already been multiple dimensions of disruption, evolutions of disruption. That's the stuff I want to sort of riff with Chris about on this. Like, what does it even mean to be like an angel investor or a VC? Like these people that are going to come to this class are going to learn to do this. They're going to have a demo day. They're going to pitch to VCs. Like you're not a VC, but you and I both know VCs well, and you're an angel investor, and you coach startups, and you talk about what the hell does all of this mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You set the context perfectly. There used to be a saying, and forgive my French if anyone has sensitive ears, but there used to be a saying which is ideas are like assholes, everyone's got one, and that execution is everything. Um, and so now, not only does everybody running around with ideas, they're now all running around with prototypes, and maybe even little businesses. And so the signal to noise is quite has shifted, and the bar for success has moved dramatically. And you mentioned this idea that everybody with an idea can now spin up a prototype. They're no longer stuck behind waiting for a technical co-founder or whatever. But the risk is even deeper than that. The risk is that generating a lot of kinds of software becomes as easy as generating a Google Doc. So you remember how hard it was to generate a newsletter or a newspaper, or God forbid, a book back in the day before the printing press. Well, that just got easier and easier and easier and easier until now anybody with sort of a brain fart can spin up a doc and email it to their colleagues. And it's a publishing grade document with beautiful fonts and whatever. And so there will be a time, and it's increasingly true, where these LLMs, these large language models, will just generate software spontaneously to perform tasks for you or your small little group or department. And so the competition for app developers, for software developers, for startups is going to be coming from all over the place. The zone's going to get flooded with software. And so the trick is to build stuff that can't be spun up in a prompt. And generally, these are two, they need two characteristics, one of two, or maybe two of two characteristics, and then an underlying principle, which is it's better if these ideas are massively multiplayer. So think of a social network or a video game or a two-sided or three-sided marketplace where the rules have to be consistent for all sides. So you can't just run on custom bespoke software that was generated on the fly. Or the software is moving physical assets around. Think of Airbnb or Uber or diagnostics companies who have physical labs and things like this. And then it's also ideal that your idea is not trying to plug holes in the LLMs, like trying to fix gaps, but rather riding on top of the LLM so that if you ask yourself, hey, if ChatGPT gets smarter, do I succeed better or am I at risk of getting killed? And so you want to build products and businesses that float on top of the innovation, the billions and billions of dollars being sunk in by these hyperscalers, not sort of trying to fill a gap and just get crushed by one of the elephants. So that's a long answer to your question, but that's how I think about it.
I think that's spot on. Let me throw some more stuff into the pot. So I think you're spot on that the trick is one, not to build to leave room for the models to continue to evolve as they will, obviously, and to ride on top of them, as you put it. And so like when you're the ship on top of the, on top of the water. And so as the tide rises, you rise along with it. And so you want the models to succeed. The better they get, the better you get. And so like that, those are obviously the applications to focus on. And to your point, applications that one are multiplayer and have, relationships are important. It's easy to switch to another software if it's just you using it. But if it's you and a bunch of relationships using it, it's hard to switch to another software. Like we've seen these kinds of, network dynamics and high costs of
Mhm.
switching. Everybody wants to leave
Yes.
Twitter, the vast majority of people, but they can't
Yes.
because they're stuck there. Because some of their friends insist on spending their time embarrassing themselves on that platform. So they
Hmm.
just can't leave. Okay, and so like that's valuable. Let's give it to those. But I
Don't,
propose.
Dimitri, don't tempt me to make this political, okay?
No, yeah, that's it. We're just going to tease people. We're not going to get into that. And then there's the other side of the coin, though, I propose, which is if you extrapolate, and I think we're seeing lots of signs of that already, including in venture capital, where Andy Warhol, right, said that everybody was going to get their 15 minutes of fame. And I think we're moving into that's another dimension that companies are moving into, where in
Hmm.
the past, we've always, obviously, thought about making companies that were long lasting and that could build accrue value over time. But why? Because it's hard to build companies and build products and takes a lot of investment. And so you have to be, you have to derive value from the thing you built for a long time in order to recoup the investment and make a profit. But in a world where you can build a product in an hour, you could build 1,000 products in an hour. I mean, not you, your AI agent. You say, build me 1,000 different
Yes.
products in the space that says, I got you, give me an hour. And you launch the 1,000 products. In a world like that, I think it's clear that the dynamics change where people
Yeah.
say, I don't need to build any company that lasts. I just need to build a meme that takes off right now for the next hour after that. It's only going to last for an hour, but it's going to accrue a bunch of value in that hour because everybody wanted to try it. And they spent their
Yeah.
$5. There is no long-term thing. And I'm just going to, and the people that do the best are the people that can launch things faster and are better in a sense. Some meme makers are better than other meme makers. And so the
Yeah,
skill is that.
that's really interesting. I have this kind of worldview, this hypothesis that I call unbundling. It used to be termed, that term is not a term I made up. It's been applied to apps on phones and telcos and cable companies. But I think unbundling is being applied to everything, everywhere. Songs are being unbundled from albums, shows are being unbundled from networks. Um, Almost like families, kids and parents are being unbundled from family units. Like everything is being decomposed and compiled at runtime for hyper personalization. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm passing no judgment on it. It's just a technology driven trend.
Mhm,
What you said reminded me of this, which is that employees are being unbundled from companies and they're becoming just temporarily useful to projects, right?
mhm,
There's this temporariness to their attachment to projects or to outcomes. And what you're saying is there's an unbundling from a functionality from apps or from businesses that they'll be temporarily useful at runtime for certain people at certain times. And those things might be like, fireflies in the night. They might just disappear and you just don't, they don't need to be durable.
mhm.
Um, I'm a maybe we talked about how old we both are. I'm a little old school and I like to build durable things. I don't like to build sandcastles on the beach, right? And so I would still, as a founder, try to build something that's durable with network effects, with multiplayer, with physical assets, with differentiation above and beyond the LLMs. But I think you're right, this idea that we have to hold on so tightly that this thing is going to be the thing I do for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. That's going to be my legacy. I think you're right. We're going to have to change our attitudes to the same way we change our attitudes to owning cars because of Uber, or owning properties. It's all about access versus ownership. This is all about being of service in the moment versus being some durable long-term thing that we can't control.
Hmm. Yeah, we're pointing at the same thing. Like this is
Yeah.
not a this is a cultural and evolution of uh, what we as humans in the developed world, when I was at Google, Google had a bunch of researchers, and basically what they came up with, and I was working on launching Google Plus, was that the only
Mm.
problems that people in developed world have are two problems: loneliness and boredom. And that those are the problems to solve. And if you build products for loneliness and boredom, then those products succeed because that's the desire of people sort of outside of like, I need to operate logistics of shipping or whatever else, like B2B, but like B2C was that. And then this unbundling, um, which again is happening across many different dimensions. Everything gets optimized for these two polarities that we're discussing, which is the one that
Mm.
you're championing. And by the way, I too agree with that, like because I love to build products. I'm not just trying to buy lottery tickets.
Right.
Then to me, like that's not what I would do. But certainly that's what the dynamics are going to be. And it's like from a venture capital standpoint, again, you're not a venture capitalist, but you know them. From a venture capital standpoint, this is a really crazy world to try to adjust to. Like how do you invest in companies where the dynamics are that people can be throwing a million new companies a day coming up because they don't care about long-term planning. They're just trying to get people's attention because we live in the attention economy to get them to use their product for a bit. Like you don't have time to do due
Yes.
diligence.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Yeah, you mentioned those two needs in the developed world. I've heard the other version of that, which is most consumer apps or all consumer apps that succeed are attached to the seven deadly sins. And so you can think about, you do your own mapping, but
I
something
know
like
the
pride.
sins well. I'm guilty.
Yeah, but like pride somehow maps to, Apple, or greed to
Yeah.
Amazon, or lust to Tinder, or, envy to Snapchat, and so on. So there is a really interesting mapping you can do there. But as it relates to as an investor, how do you bet on companies and founders? The answer is quite simple to a degree, which is it's everything has changed, but nothing has changed. So the similar answers that I would give you pre-ChatGPT, I would give you now, which is, do I believe in the pedigree of this founding team? And have they demonstrated an ability to execute in the past? Now, typically there are, tokens or signals you can collect for this, like they went to Stanford, or they went to YC, or they went to a great institute. Um, Absent that, they have built something already that is scaling. So they've proven that they can build something.
Mhm.
Now that last bit has gotten easier, and so that this is possibly what's changed. But what I'm also looking for is, are they solving a real problem? Like, is there real pain, inefficiency, and waste that starts to evaporate? I particularly like to find disruption. So a lot of founders, especially in second and third tier markets, tend to look for ways of optimizing problems. Like, how do we partner with an incumbent and make their life a little easier? I'm much more interested in disrupting incumbents. So, Uber didn't partner with taxis, they killed taxis. Netflix didn't partner with Blockbuster, they killed Blockbuster. So, what's the real problem and how are you disrupting it? Do these people have a unique insight, an insight born from domain expertise, or a view on the world that is not immediately obvious? Do they have access to unique data, proprietary data that means that the LLMs will respond in a different way than just the general ChatGPT thing? Do they have access to or an insight on distribution, unique access to distribution? So getting it in front of users and driving growth. And then finally, the thing I touched on earlier is, do I believe that there's a line of sight to some kind of real moat, a flywheel or a network effect, so that the more people who use this thing, the more valuable it'll be, and therefore the more people who use it, and therefore the more value it'll be, and around we go. And so those are just, some of the things I think an investor is looking for. And then there's a bunch of stylistic stuff, right? Like, are they using, there's like the way dogs kind of sniff at each other's butts. It's like, are they using the right words? Do they have the right kind of swagger? Are they confident without being arrogant, right? There's all of this style over substance stuff that also it actually plays a role and is also worth noting, and often people don't talk about it enough.
Huge. Yeah, thank you.
This is
Okay, so
absolutely
maybe we'll
fascinating.
pause here. And
No,
yeah,
we're not pausing. I was just going to dive into the conversation because it shifted to what makes a startup investable. What are
Mhm.
venture capitalists doing now to adapt to the changing, I guess, ecosystem? So AI is transforming how VCs operate, and the way AI investors are thinking about investing is also changing. And I was going to ask, actually, what makes a moat today in a world where you can build 1,000 products in an hour and you can launch it? So Ahmed and I are actually working on a research paper for investors. It's titled "The Future of AI Investing: Unlocking Exponential Growth and Impact." And I was going to ask both of you, Dimitri and Chris, from your experience, I think Chris already touched on this a little bit. A moat is network effect. A moat is the strength of the founding team. Have they demonstrated that they can build something scalable before? But beyond that, today, how are you both seeing the investment landscape shifting in your experience? I mean,
Yeah,
that
let me actually touch on this first in the anti-pattern, right? So when you come from, and this may offend people, and if it does, I'm sorry. Sometimes I speak and I'm a little bit not diplomatic. But if you come from the academic world, or you come from the yeah, mainly the academic or even the government world, there's often this sense of like IP or published papers or studies are like the thing to hang your head on. And in the Silicon Valley VC world, this stuff has very, very little value. Often, IP, maybe if you've invented self-driving cars or some kind of new material science or something. But in Australia and Canada and whatever, they've built some simple SaaS app and they call it IP. It's not IP, right? It's not defensible. So those are not moats. Studies, IP, research grants, not IP. Sorry, not a moat. Um, Weak moats are things like brand equity. Like I like those guys and I trust generally what they do. A slightly stronger moat is I understand those guys and I know how to use that tool. That's stronger. But then the strongest kind of moat is the one we talked about earlier, which is a flywheel of some kind. And a flywheel can take many forms, like more data is more utility, and more data, more utility. But the clearest one, the one that most people generally point to, is a pure network effect, which is like Facebook or like Airbnb. So the more people on there, the more value I get. Therefore, the more people get on there. Therefore, the more value I get. So the people relationships flywheel.
mhm. Yeah, and those are like, marketplaces and platforms that get
Yes.
those kinds of network effects where you can
Yes, but
multi-sided.
many tools that at first appear like single player tools can, with the right kind of creativity, have multiplayer and network effect features.
Mhm.
So you think of Figma, Photoshop was a single player tool. Figma destroyed Photoshop. I would argue not primarily because it was web-based, but because it was web-based and real-time collaboration. Same with Google Docs. It threatened to destroy Office until Office, tried to catch up with Office 365, although it's junk. You know, you can add multiplayer to most single player tools. You just take some creativity and some thoughtfulness.
Mhm. It's spot on.
Yeah, one of the things that I feel today also, which I keep hearing a lot, especially from community builders in the Bay Area, it's that go to market is changing. Like building a product is getting easier, or just getting something to market is easy, but now actually scaling it and having it sort of
Mm.
reach millions of people fast is the hard thing, and building community is the key to that. We have a speaker coming in, Marianne, who built a community called Founders Bay, and she talks about this all the time, that community and people who just trust you and trust your product and that will stick to it is going to be the thing that makes or breaks, I guess, your ability to keep a moat.
So Marianne is actually a friend of mine. We've hung out a lot, and she's a total sweetheart and amazing. And we've traded Lebanese food recipes together too. She I would say community is an incredible way of bootstrapping your growth, building a kind of moat, and supercharging your distribution. It's a very, very powerful way. However, there are a lot of founders I've met in my career who are only building community or distracted by their community and not offering that community a product that's meaningful, that converts community to cash. And they kind of the business becomes the community. There's nothing wrong with community businesses, but it's not a traditional Silicon Valley style product-led company. So leverage community and other distribution tactics, growth tactics, but just make sure it has its right place in the mix of what you're doing.
Yeah, something for me to think about. But Dimitri, I'm so sorry. I want to ask you a question, if it's okay.
Sure.
So
I take questions.
I'm super curious, Dimitri. I know you've been teaching thousands of students over the past, I don't know how long, 2 years, not just to use Mind Studio, but to prototype rapidly. How far do you think someone can go with 2 weeks of AI prototyping training plus mentorship, etc.? Like, how far can someone go?
You can go from idea to a product and market, collecting payments. So certainly, meaning hopefully this isn't news to people. Go to YouTube and see all the tutorials, right? And so like the capabilities are there. Again, once you know how to use the tools, and you're going to invest some time, like like don't fall into the hype of like you just tell the machine build me a multi-billion-dollar company, go, and it like builds it for you like that. It's not the case today. But so you got to invest some time and nudging the machine to give you what you want, and then you can bring it to market and do it. Now, whether that's the right approach or not, to just in 2 weeks go into launching a product, but certainly in 2 weeks you can launch multiple products. You can learn to do it in 2 weeks, and in that same 2 weeks launch multiple products before you get out of the cohort. Like you could do that, and you could get products in front of VCs, although the dynamic there again is different. And so you're going to need to, I think, like the insight Chris is providing here is just priceless. It's the most important advice because your target audience has a different perspective now. And so that's going to be really important. We'll touch upon that as well a bit in the course. I'll make sure I weave some of that in. So I think like that capability is there. Anyone can do it. You don't need to be. Some people say I'm not technical. That's kind of always a weird thing. What they mean is like I don't write code. And you kind of don't need to do that anymore. Although the more if you know a little bit about writing code, if you get fascinated a little bit and you do some tutorials or whatever, do a boot camp or whatever before or after, like, is it valuable to do it? Yes, it is. It teaches you design thinking. It gets you to help the machine figure out what it needs to do. Sometimes the machine needs help from you. Sometimes it just goes off and does it on its own. But like it's super accessible. That's the thing that's from a product building standpoint, that is a sort of profoundly new dynamic that certainly has never existed before. That I couldn't have said that even with a crooked face, nevertheless a straight face to somebody that like you can go and like build and launch these products and start collecting money with any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you mentioned to me before that the goal isn't necessarily to get a product in market and to start a startup in 2 weeks using AI prototyping tools, but it's to build something that you can show your friends and a potential co-founding CTO or test for a little bit and iterate quickly versus invest in a dev company that will build something for you in 2 weeks. And then you won't really have the flexibility to change it very quickly, or at least not for free.
Totally. Like I think one of the things that gets disrupted massively by all of this is like all of these like offshore development shops where you needed them in the past because they were going to build you the prototype. It's always been countless problems with that kind of an approach. You certainly don't need those kinds of players anymore for like getting something in front of investors or getting to some MVP. You might still need them long term to like sort of refactor everything that you've built and make it scalable. and kind of do all the fine tuning of it, which is like the devil is in the details. And in a world like this, certainly that's the need. But from like the cohort that's going to be here of like, I've got an idea. I want to be able to get in front of people, socialize it, learn from it, potentially pitch it to some investors, realizing the dynamics of that, or get it into market and get some, early usage like that. That's never been like that.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah, unfortunately, as has been the course of history, it seems, um, you know, capital continues to accrue to the top, the top, right? And so if you have been in one of these other markets, Philippines, India, etc., where you have sort of just been sitting back and taking requirements and or answering the phone with someone else's script, you're in trouble. You are in a lot of trouble. And if you're in, in anywhere in the US, anywhere in the developed world, and you think of your job, your life as being able to take someone else's script and just execute it,
Mhm.
you're in trouble. The value is going to accrue to those with intention, intuition, hustle, drive, um, entrepreneurship, risk-taking, creativity, lateral thinking, problem solving. In short, you have to be woke of a different kind. You have to be awake, and yeah, you can't sleepwalk through your career for much longer, if at all.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's fundamental, again, kind of, if anything people get out of this session, like I think like it's those kinds of things. The world has changed massively. And
Mm.
again, with it come amazing opportunities that never existed before. And with it also come
Yes.
many other dynamics that are radically disruptive.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, haven't I
Pros and cons to all of it.
It's that the bar is lower to get something to market, but it's much higher to make it succeed, to make it last, to make it sustainable, to make it compete, and to get VC funding for it, right? Which is why we're going about asking VCs a lot of questions so that we can come back with insights for the participants of the Institute.
But let me say something else controversial because I just like doing it. It's
I was
fun.
going to ask a
Uh,
controversial question now, Chris, but you go for it.
well, you've mentioned VCs a few times, right?
I did.
The VCs are our friends. We love VCs. VCs make venture scale companies succeed and work, especially historically. But the vast majority of VCs don't even break even. They have no special insights more than founders or operators. Some of them have just terrible capital allocators. They're terrible at their own job. And they are just as confused and bewildered by this disruption and change as we are. And their job is at risk as well, because the AI is eating VC and is minimizing the amount of capital requirements to build massive unicorn startups.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of VCs and a lot of angels, and they're just as confused and freaked out as we are. If we're talking collectively, us as operators and founders or potential founders. And I just one last quick point on that, especially in second and third tier markets, in in the Australias and Canadas and Europes of the world. These VCs just give you really dumb advice, like go do a B2B thing and prop up some incumbent instead of your idea is actually disruptive and your incumbents are going to hate it, and you probably should go direct to consumer. And they just kill these companies in the crib. So just really be careful about VC, like kind of just chasing VCs around. You want to have conviction while also being coachable. It's a real art, and also be careful of advisor whiplash. You want to find someone you believe in and work with them in a stateful long-term way, because every advisor has different advice for different circumstances, and wisdom is knowing what to apply when.
Mhm.
And who
If I could
believes in you. Yeah.
if I could paraphrase that, don't ask them, they don't know. My VC friends are losing their minds at this moment. Their business has been turned. It's like an ant farm that somebody took and shook, and they don't know which way is up. All of their dynamics are upside down and sideways, and so like and also yeah, I caution people always, like people come to me for all kinds of mentorship periodically. I caution them on chasing VCs. VCs are not your customer. VCs are not your target. Your the steps you need to take, and certainly what I'm going to teach you is not, hey, let's build something for VCs. You don't want to build something for VCs. You want to build something for users. VCs, potentially, you might need them to do something with them, but they are not the goal. In
Yeah.
fact, the amazing thing now, and again, why VCs are losing their mind, is they are uh, uh, orders of magnitude, certainly one order of magnitude, less relevant and less needed. Where in the past, if you wanted to build a company, again, you needed real financial resources, and VCs were a place where you could go because, wealthy people and various institutions park their money there as like one of the asset classes. And so they were the places you needed to go to get the money in order to try to build something. Like it used to be you had to go to the library in order to get knowledge, or you have to go to a university in order to get knowledge. Now you don't. Not knocking our friends at Stanford, but like now you can just get knowledge. Okay. And so these are the same dynamics. VCs aren't the gatekeepers anymore. Can they be an amazing amplifier? And are some of them tastemakers? Yes. The
I
chances
just
of,
want to add a point to Chris and Dimitri. I think the thing, and I think the people who were, I see some familiar name who were in the program last year. The first experience I had, I didn't know what a VC is when I started my first company, and I think this is exactly what you need to learn. Is you need to learn your customer. You need to learn how to deal with your customer. That's your goal. And the VC would come next. Started the company with the $50 and closed the book with $1 million by the end of the year. I think that's what a real company is, and this is where you should focus. I was talking to, again, doing a fundraising that's gonna close soon for my startup. Talking to my VC friends and the VCs that I'm raising from, they're telling me they're rejecting applications for companies who are making 400K plus in ARR just because they're shocked. They don't know what to make of the market. How fast you can spin a product, how fast you can have people pay for the product, and then next thing you know, there's 10 other companies who are doing exactly the same thing. So I really think what you should master and get out of this class is this experience of like, how do I understand my customers? How do I serve my customers? And then look into I really like the idea of or the notion of all those tools are just becoming another utility, something like a Google Doc that you can spin out a product.
That's
So
right.
think about like where you sit on top of it. A layer that sits on top of it, I think this is where the money is. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I want to actually, I want to extend what you said, Dimitri. I think it was really beautiful. Your product is not for VCs. You're not building something for VCs. Let me extend that and retouch on some things we've already said. You're not building product for VCs. You're not building a product for academics. You're not building a product for your domain expert that you left a job and you're trying to make sure not. A lot of people try to avoid being embarrassed by the domain experts, so they use a lot of jargon and a lot of stuff because they don't want to be embarrassed by their community. Your product is not for government grant bureaucrats. And here's a more provocative idea. Your product is not even for customers. Your product is for end users. It's for people who are experiencing the pain. And so many companies and founders I meet in my advisory work, they're wrapped around the axle trying to like, what does the VC want? And what are my friends and colleagues at my old business company? How would they judge this? And what is the person who's going to buy the software going to think? And what dashboard do they need? And they forget about the person who has the problem, who is living the problem. And then one last point to your note, about the revenue. Be careful about quality of revenue. So it's sometimes very fast to get new users, but there's a lot of churn, and it's also sometimes easy to get a big check, like $400,000 from one big enterprise, but there's no repeatability. And so you need to build something that scales and retains. And that quality of revenue, I think, is going to be very important in this next cycle. Like products like Lovable one of the vibe coding tools. It's great at the beginning. After you try to make it do anything real, it starts to die. So I think the churn is going to be really high there. There's a lot of companies, and I'm guilty of all of this stuff, by the way, guys. I'm not talking about. None of this advice is because I'm a genius. It's because I made all the mistakes myself and learned. There are companies, especially again in second, third tier markets, where they hear VCs say, "Oh, you need to have $1 million in revenue," and they're like, "Oh my God, where is the closest $1 million check that I can get?" And so then they go super serve one enterprise for $1 million or two enterprises, $500,000 each. That is not a repeatable deal. That is a professional services business. So you need to find low effort, high scale revenue by solving real people's problems.
This is fascinating. Honestly, what we're learning is 1 hour is not enough. There's so much knowledge just in this panel alone. And I feel like, we keep bringing up or opening topics that are so important for aspiring founders right now. I have one comment, first of all, which is the changing landscape of startup innovation. There are so many moving pieces here. One, it's how easy it is to prototype and prototype rapidly and get your idea in front of customers or friends or potential investors. 2, it's that investment is changing, or the investment landscape is changing. 3, that you can build a one-person, $1 billion business. It's this term that's coming out, that's spreading right now. With the rise of AI agents and AI employees, it's becoming easier and easier to build and scale and go to market and make revenue with... Sorry, Chris has something to say about
No,
that.
no. Finish your thought. Finish your thought.
I think both Chris and I are
Disagree.
keep
They're
going.
itching.
Controversial.
Yeah, I think you said the most controversial thing
Oh,
of
dear
all
God.
of these. Yeah, but keep going.
Why don't we talk about that next time, actually? Can you build a $1 billion
all I
company
wanted
with
to do, yeah, all I wanted to say was I just wanted to take some credit, because this idea that you can build a $1 billion company with 3 employees, this started on my podcast.
No way!
So it did. Yeah. So we had a Reacts episode with Jeremiah Oyang and Ben Parr and I'm sorry, the other person. And then Ben Parr said, this is early in the ChatGPT moment. And he said, I think we're going to see a unicorn built by 3 people. Then Jeremiah took that and posted it on LinkedIn, and it got 1 million views.
Whoa.
And from that point forward, everybody, it's now become one person, but that I'm sure others came up with it independently, and I'm sure it would have come up anyway, but I'm pretty sure we were the first ones to talk about that on a larger forum.
I think you need to upgrade that to be $1 trillion.
$1 trillion.
Incredible. And we also have a hand, and we may need 5 more minutes because there's one question left, and I wanted to circle back to the Institute, and then let's make this a weekly thing. Chris, we'd love to have you again. We're gonna have
Chris asked me how much of a time commitment this was gonna be.
an hour.
And I said to him an hour. So I want to be respectful of Chris's time, if you're even able to stick for the rest of this, and then you guys could talk about getting more hours from Chris.
Well, let's wrap up. I do have to run soon, but I'm happy to wrap up with the last question and kind of share how people can find me, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
definitely.
And by the way, I can stick around if people have some more questions, but I want to be very sensitive about Chris's time.
Yeah, time flew unbelievable. It's literally been almost an hour. Chris, thank you so much for being here. This was so interesting and so beneficial. We have this recorded. We're going to launch it or publish it soon. I wanted to just circle back on one important topic that we center around it in our curriculum and in the Institute, and it's something for aspiring founders to think about. It's the most controversial thing, so we could talk about it next time as well. But my question was to Ahmed, and we all know that there's this tension, right, between rapid growth or exponential growth and returns, but also embedding AI ethics in the design stage of your product. I interviewed a bunch of VCs recently and also founders, and they keep coming back to the conclusion that when you're launching a startup, the most important thing you have to focus on is survival and growth. But I know that at HAI, for example, you're approached by many companies that are Series B or Series A or B startups that invest lots of money into HAI research to improve their, I want to say, ethical considerations, responsible AI considerations. So why should a startup founder care about ethics in AI when they should be focused on survival?
I'll give a quick answer if that's okay, and hopefully we can talk about it in more detail in the next iteration for the best use of everybody's time. But I think it all boils down to building the right guardrails, because the term safety is probably, or ethics is not possibly the most inclusive term, but think about it from a responsibility angle, and also from a safety slash protection type of angles. I think that broadens the horizon a little bit. So one thing that we look at, and many of our companies ask for that in particular, including big tech, Google, IBM, and folks from different industries, Louis Vuitton, Pepsi, Accenture, McKinsey, with so many clients, they all ask that same question: how do we create these new AI-based technologies more responsibly in order to protect the companies, protect the users? I want to point to that point that Chris mentioned, keeping an eye on the end user, the actual person who will have that pain. There's no magic bullet that creates, your check boxes to be all checked as a lottery ticket, like somebody mentioned. There is hard work. You have to check for so many evolving considerations. Like, there is not only what we know about user data protection. Very nice. Everybody has been building solutions, even in the cloud services, AWS and GCP and Azure. There are, things that you can just check a box and you get this aspect addressed properly. But now with the variety of use cases and the variety of solutions, it becomes very hard to define what is the potential harm in the first place. And when that harm happens, it becomes it's usually a little too late to go back and address it. So starting the design process with safety and security, and in general ethics, I would say that's still a good term to use. And putting the right, not just guardrails, but also training interventions, inference interventions that can mitigate against risks once they happen, before the risk becomes a major risk that destroys not just your reputation, but also costs you a lot of customers, a major part of your revenue, as we have seen before. That just emphasizes how important it is to keep an eye, not just again on the major considerations, but the adversarial potential situations.